welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Deolani. Should we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today? Lovely island of Fawnhallow today. I was like, hold on a minute, that didn't seem like a right cadence of a witch to speak. Do people speak like this? I don't know. The world is topsy-turvy. Everything is backwards. Who knows what's going on? But what are we going to talk about today? I don't really know, to be perfectly honest. I don't have any of my daily games to be playing because I was playing a little bit earlier today. Really, I should be doing a bit of drawing, but you know, that's neither here nor there. As we say, good evening, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 10:01 p.m. on Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024. Yeah, what have I been doing recently? I don't know. I did a D&D session yesterday. I think I already spoke about D&D session. I'm just like, I was thinking about it more. I was like, damn, I wonder what's going to happen. But unfortunately, both the players and I will have to, you know, it's a rare case for the DM to also have to be like, oh, the DM will have to see what happens next week as well. Because you would have thought the DM would know, but, you know, I only know parts of it. I don't know how the dice are going to roll. I don't know how my players are going to play. Play. And the haters, I don't know how we're going to hate. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. This seems like a... Oh, let's talk about Death and Taxes. I forgot. I beat that game on the weekend during a live stream, so you can go watch if you want. As I was going to say, that this should be like a sit down and talk sort of episode. So Death and Taxes, how was it? I think it was good. I'm not going to say like it was mind-bendingly amazing or anything. I think it was amusing, definitely to say the least. And it had some cool ideas in it, but I think at the end of the day it didn't end up being quite my cup of tea of how it transpired, which I think is a bit of a shame, because I think it's a really cool core of Death and Taxes, but I think it just, I don't know, it just slightly missed the mark for me. But if, I guess I'll warn you before spoilers, it's not like I don't think the story is that important to Death and Taxes, at least to me. I feel like the core concept of it is the best part of it. But if Death and Taxes you don't know, it's kind of like if you played Papers, Please. It's got similar energy to that, where basically you are a Grim Reaper and you are judging which souls live and which souls die in this game. But you are basically, you're working as like a corporate drone essentially, so you get tasks set to you by your manager, Fate, and he'll just be like, oh, 2 humans need to die, or he'll be like, anyone who studies science needs to die, etc, etc, etc. He'll give you like very specific specifications of which you need to adhere to if you want to keep your job for like the game, that sort of thing. And really, I think the core concept of it is actually really funny. It's really silly because it's actually like, if you think about it, a very serious like matter, like this philosophical question. If you choose like who should live and who should die, it's very weird having that fate put in your hands. I mean, if you think about how much a trolley problem already gets under people's skin, can you imagine a trolley problem when like the stakes are equal or something, so you can't even take a utilitarian approach? Or the trolley problem where you're explicitly told that you had to let, you know, a very bad person live. I think by the nature of like this philosophical exploration, that it's almost kind of like a trolley problem, where it's a really interesting core at its heart, with this sort of idea of exploring your own philosophical, I suppose, not priorities, but like boundaries, I suppose, with it, at the same time as you know, putting it in like a gamified sense, because Death and Taxes is quite a funny game, I'd say. There's a lot of, it's very funny like reading the profiles of who comes in and who you're judging, because a lot of them tend to be rather silly, to be honest. And like, you know, you read someone that's like, oh, it's this biologist who's trying to like dreams of a world where she can take over through like biogenetically engineered animals, and you're just like, what? They're very light-hearted in that sense, which they should be, I suppose, because it is like if they were too serious, I think it would be very much leaning into the depth of a philosophical quandary. Like it's like a really challenging philosophical notion, which I'm not sure that game is trying to go for. It's got a much more light-hearted feel, you know, making fun of corporate sort of like nonsense at the same time as giving you freedom to have a silly fun time with it, right? But yeah, So I think its core concept is actually very strong. It's very fun in that sense, because it's a lot of fun, especially at the beginning, just being like, oh, you know, who are we going to let live? Are we going to let the zookeeper who, I don't know, secretly steal stuff from the penny store live? Or are we going to let the big boss CEO who like helps out at a dog shelter in his spare time or something, you know? What's the answer to that? I don't know. Really, it's meant to be like the entire conceit of a game is it's meant to be, it's up for you to judge. Kind of. Now, this is where I'm going to say spoiler warnings like completely off. There's no like half spoilers, I think, at this point. I'm going to spoil like the entire game for you at this point if you want to play it. So if you want to play it, go play it first. Otherwise, this entire conceit is ruined. But yes, that's why the reason I say kind of is because it kind of loses that plot later on. Because as it turns out this entire time, rather than actually being like this sort of philosophical, silly quandary game, like on a story where you're sort of like admonished or praised for your actions, if it actually is like a sense of game structure, like a point-based game structure behind the entire thing. Because it turns out to the end, to the surprise of no one, fate is orchestrating the entire thing and is trying to orchestrate the death of humanity, which is fine, you know. It makes sense on a plot point. I'm not saying it was like a plot twist or anything like that. I myself was basically subscribing to being like, hey, you know, I'm going to basically suck up to the boss the entire time. But I don't know, something about it which I can't quite put my finger on. I don't want to say this makes a game bad. I just think it makes a game not for me in this case. Like weirdly, like the systematic structure I think takes away from the philosophical, like amusing element of it. Because I think I was approaching the game with like, it's like a trolley problem, but it's like inherently silly at the same time, which at the same time exposes a lot of interesting questions, like, do I let this terminally ill person live, or do I sentence this person who, you know, still has a life ahead of him but has made some bad choices but on the path of redemption live? But it's presented in such like a silly, like theatrical, over the top way that it sort of allows you to hide behind that guise of comedy, I suppose, without having to delve too deeply in, while still exploring your sort of like subconscious intrinsic decision making when it comes to, you know, what you value in life. Everyone's got different sort of criteria and metrics. Like there is no right answer. There can't be a right answer. How do you quantify human life? But the fact that actually it turns out this entire time you have been quantifying it, like the people you've been letting live and the people you've been letting die has an impact on the world, which is fair. Like on its own, I think like that's a cool system, but I think it just sort of contradicts with the idea of a game I built in my mind, which I would like to say is the onus is on me for. It ends up making it feel weird. It sort of like brings me back from like the philosophical concepts which is being explored, like me questioning my own, like kind of like what's a word, like not input my own decisions and that sort of thing, like am I making right choices here and there, and then actually puts like a quantifiable, yes you made a right choice, no you didn't make a right choice, because now the world you made is like too far gone into poverty, or the world you made is too dangerous, or like the climate's too like messed up. It's sort of, I don't know, I feel like it takes away from it to an extent where I'm just like, you know, like I get why it's like that, but at the same time I kind of wish it wasn't. I kind of wish it like sort of, you see the consequences of a world, but it wasn't because you were trying to like, it wasn't against this like big plot you're working towards, or it wasn't like because of this metric you failed to meet, or etc etc. It just like is a direct consequence. I don't know, like it's weirdly that tying it in with this plot of fate wanting to destroy the world and it being framed as such, being like, oh you failed to save the world, rather than being like fate being a detached impartial viewer being like, oh well, looks like you kind of ruined that one, didn't you? Made me feel like I don't know how to think about that. It didn't, it's not that it didn't sit right to me, because I understand it and I think conceptually it's fine by itself, but it also, I don't know, I think the major point I'm trying to make is that it like is coherent with itself, but it ended up being incoherent with the idea of it I'd built in my head, which made me go, I'm not sure what to make of it at this point. Because it really is a lot of fun, just like fun and silly, and like in a dark way, I suppose, judging who should get the live or die sort of mark on the pieces of paper. But saying that was like actual metrics behind it, now sort of I feel like because it's sort of like saying, oh, you know, there is now a right answer to the trolley problem or something, where you go like, oh, well, now it's no longer a thought experiment, it's now something to be optimized, which I think triggered in my brain to be like, oh, you know, hey, this is something which can be optimized. It's now a game rather than like a thought experiment, albeit a much more silly one of that, which I want to establish is not something inherently wrong with the game. It's just like contradicted with what I think I was expecting from the game and what I enjoyed most about it. But yeah, I think the difficulty of it as well is it's hard to understand the impact you have by letting people choose. Well, two things. One, it's hard to understand the impact you have with letting people choose who lives and dies unless you get the lamp and the snow globe, which very much feels like, because you had to play through the game and get lucky to even get it in the first place, it feels like the game starts at New Game Plus rather than New Game, the first New Game. Because otherwise it's sort of like, I mean, there was a moment which, like, very made me question it, which might only have been because I was, like, towards the end of the game, and the apocalypse was already basically set in motion, which kind of makes the last, like, few days a triviality, really, where I was like, I can't remember. I was like, who should I let live out of these people? I will let the care home worker live, because, like, she's, you know, because I was like, there's a medical emergency, there's, like, a virus, isn't it, going on in the world right now, so I'll let the medical person live because maybe it'll help it. And then it just turned out, the consequence of doing that was like, oh, it made the situation worse because that medical person got sick with a virus, and it turns out it was a rage virus which made her kill like all the people in vulnerable positions. And I was like, what? It sort of just made me go like, I don't know how I could even possibly guess that would have been the consequence, which, if the point was that it was a philosophical quandary, I suppose, where it's just like, oh, you can't foresee the future of that sort of things, there is no right and right answer, I'd be like, I feel like I'd be more willing to accept that and be like, yeah, that makes sense. But because there is a quantifiable metric behind it, I was like, what? So, like, you're telling me it was a wrong decision through something I couldn't judge? Which, I don't know, it just feels a bit weird to me. And I also looked it up afterwards. Apparently, just like some people, if you choose to let live or choose to let die, or like if you make a wrong decision basically on them, you lock yourself into an ending, like just immediately. Like one of them, as it turns out, was like, I think it was like a terminally ill patient. I think I said, instead of letting them live, I was like, oh, they should die because they're like terminally ill. Let's put them out of misery or something. I can't remember exactly what I said. And it turns out by doing that, that locks you into the fact that there will be a viral infection, a viral plague on the earth. And I'm just like, okay. That feels a bit weird to me. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I don't agree with some of the gameplay decisions, but I also want to acknowledge the fact that I'm not a game designer, so everything I say should be taken with a grain of salt. But the other thing I wanted to say, what was the other thing I wanted to say about it? I can't remember. There was another comment I wanted to make about the decision making. Oh, because of the structure of the game itself being built around this premise of like this corporate business of death, I feel like people immediately are going to be buying into that business structure. So like the game sort of like very much pilots you into following the rules, otherwise you'll get fired. And you might be like, oh, but this game is trying to egg you on to rebel against it. And to a certain extent, I agree. But the fact that afterwards, when I got the ending, I got the most popular ending. I was like, that's weird, because I played in such a way that I basically adhered to all the rules. I don't believe that most people in this game, or at least 80% of the people of this game, would strictly adhere to the rules the entire time. I feel like a lot of people would want to rebel against it, you know, especially against a corporate structure, which is sort of like a universally panned thing. So it kind of surprised me. But the thing I was thinking about was more is because of this design element of it, where very, very early on, I myself did this, I'm sure other people did as well. I chose like either everyone to live, or I didn't directly obey the instructions. Fate was like, okay, that's your first strike. If you get 2 more, you'll be fired. And I was like, okay, well, I want to see the rest of this game. I guess this game is basically trying to teach me, hey, follow fate. Otherwise, you know, if you make too many mistakes, you'll get fired. Because at this time, I'm thinking it's like a philosophical quandary sort of game, right? It's like, to me, I guess it's this misconstrued message where the game devs probably wanted you to be like, oh, Fate's actually the bad guy. We're like dropping these hints at the same time. You got to find like the right moments to rebel against Fate, and it's like this sort of mathematical metric thing which you got to find out the right moments which work. Like maybe when he's not in the office, you can sort of rebel against him, or maybe where you can sort of twist the rules a little bit. Or maybe you can distract him, I don't know. But I interpreted it as, at least to me, was, hey, this is a game which is going to make you make difficult decisions. We don't want you circumventing the rules, because if you do, you're basically trying to cheat the system. What's the point of a trolley problem if you go, oh, I pull a third lever and then suddenly it stops the trolley? Like, no, that's not the point. The whole point of a trolley problem is it's going to go on one of the two tracks, or 1 people or 5 people. You have to make a decision. Even choosing not to make a choice is still a decision. That's how I interpreted the strike system. So I was like, okay, let's follow these rules. So one, it doesn't, and we don't get a game over early, and 2, it's sort of just like a, hey, you have to make difficult decisions, which I think is just like I'm not going to say that's a fault of developers, because again, I don't know. I just want to talk about my own experience of it, which is why I think I ended up having such big dissonance when I was like, oh, this game was like actually like a metric, like what's a word, like you know, the same way like Monster Promise, where you're sort of like balancing these stats or something. Like it's like a social game of balancing bars, right? And I was like, oh, okay. It kind of like caught me a little bit off guard, because I was like, oh, I thought the strike system was to make us make difficult decisions. So I guess what I'm saying is, maybe I think I basically went into it thinking it's too much like Papers, Please, or like thinking too much, that comparing it to Papers, Please, when it wasn't Papers, Please in the end, where I was like, oh, I'm going to be forced into these difficult decisions. I'm going to have to make, you know, like in Papers, Please, do I make a decision to, you know, accept a bribe, like arrest an innocent person for money to feed my family, or do I let like a revolutionary pass the gates for a cause that I believe in but might put my job on the line? Something like that, where I'd be like weighing up like who is more deserving to live and who's not, making these tough decisions. It was like, oh, you know, I guess it kind of feels like maybe a bit of a rug pull for me personally, where it's just like, oh, you know, you just chose wrong this entire time in things which you thought were just philosophical, basically debates. And I was like, oh, okay. But I think like that's why like this new game, and at least I'm glad we did this new game and new game plus thing, because to me it feels like this new game, the first time you play through, feels like more of a philosophical debate. But playing new game plus, now that you have a lamp and the globe upgrades, would feel more like a min-maxing sort of game, where you try and basically save the world by making the right people live while also not breaking the rules. Like I can't remember, like a management sort of game, I guess, is probably how to describe it. Which is interesting. I think it's interesting. It just like didn't end up being exactly really for me. Like, what would a game I liked would have been? It would have been if Fate was like an impartial person who's maybe a bit snarky, like condemning you of your choices and that sort of sense, or like commenting on them as like an outside party looking in. But it's mainly up to you to decide who lives and who dies, and then you had to sort of like live with your own consequences of that. But is that the game the developers wanted to make? And I think the answer is no. I don't think that's the game they wanted to make. So, you know, it's not on me to expect that from them. I think the characters were very engaging. I liked going to a bar and chatting to them, and hearing them talk about random nonsense here and there. But yeah, overall, would I recommend it? I would recommend it if you go in at least with the aspect that it's actually like a management sort of game. It's not like a philosophical quandary sort of game, and if you're okay with that, absolutely go for it. I think it'd be a great game for that. But if you're going in expecting like, because now I think about it, Papers, Please is also like the sort of management-esque game as well. But I guess because Papers, Please makes it very clear from the beginning, at least to me, that's what you're doing. It's like, here's the money you got to balance. You know, here are people who's going to warn you of your job and that sort of thing. Part of me wonders if I would have a different reaction to this game if I followed the path of rebellion when I got like the red paper and chose to follow that instead to try and sort of like real humanity back. But I made a decision where I was just like, I feel like most people are going to choose to rebel, so I will make a decision to like adhere and see where it goes with this. I guess I was having a lot of fun trying to decide, like trying to evaluate myself, being like, what do I value in a human life? And I was just like, it's not like a power tripping sort of thing, being like, oh wow, why did I make that decision? Sort of felt interesting. I think I would apologise, because I think if you do watch the last episode, I suppose, of me doing it, I feel like you basically get the impression of me just sort of like sending it. I think maybe like my heart wasn't fully in it, and I apologise for that. That's not fair to the game, to be honest with me playing it, but yeah, I don't know. Death and Taxes, would I recommend it? I'd give it a try. I'd give it a try for like the first first few days, and then if you don't like it by that point, I don't think you're going to like the rest of it, to be honest. It's a game which doesn't change much, I think, throughout its duration, to be honest. There's not like a huge change up in mechanics or anything like that. It's just sort of like you learn more of a story which is going on, which, if that interests you, absolutely go for it. But otherwise, I don't know. It's hard to say. Anyway, on that note, I still liked the game. You know, I still think it was worth playing. But it's just like, does my recommendation come for it? I don't know, dependent. Anyway, I'm going to round this episode off here, so if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope we see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.